White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. And Mick, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Not much going on this week, Chris. It's good to be here.
Yes, well, let's start with what we didn't anticipate, and that is the Twitter war. President Trump attacked Democratic Congressman Elijah Cummings on Saturday, saying that his district in the Baltimore area of Maryland is worse conditions, more dangerous than along the southern border. I want to put up the president's statements. His district is considered the worst in the USA. Cummings district is disgusting, rat and rodent infested mess. No human being would want to live there. In fact, median household income in Cummings district is in the upper half nationally, and Columbia, Maryland, which is part of Cummings district, has been called the safest city in America. So what is the president talking about?
And I think Maryland is, I think, on a per capita basis or per household basis, the richest state in America. You still see pictures on the internet of complete poverty in Baltimore, Maryland. What this is about, though, is the president fighting back against what he saw as being illegitimate attacks about the border in the hearing this week. If you go online, you can see the questioning that Elijah Cummings did of Kevin McAleenan regarding the conditions at the border. Mr. Cummings saying that children were sleeping or sitting in their own feces. That's not right. It's not accurate. Borne by the fact, by the way, that Mr. Cummings has not been to the border in recent memory, certainly not during this administration. And when the president hears lies like that, he is going to fight back. And that's what you saw in those tweets.
This goes back to what happened with the 4 members of the squad. Nobody objects to the president defending his border policies, but this seems, Mick, to be the worst kind of racial stereotype. Let me finish.
Yeah.
Racial stereotyping. Black congressman, majority black district. I mean, no human being would want to live there. Is he saying people that live in Baltimore are not human beings?
So, Chris, help me with this. When the president attacks AOC +3, when he attacks the squad last week, he gets accused of being a racist. When Nancy Pelosi does it a few days later, the left and many members of the media, not you in particular, I'd make that clear, come to Nancy's defense, how it couldn't possibly be racist, that she was simply attacking their ideas. The president is doing the same. The president is attacking Mr. Cummings for saying things that are not true about the border. I think it's right for the president to raise the issue of, look, I was in Congress for 6 years. If I had poverty in my district like they have in Baltimore, if I had crime in my district like they have in Chicago, if I had homelessness in my district like they have in San Francisco, and I spent all of my time in Washington, D.C. chasing down this Mueller investigation, this bizarre impeachment crusade, I'd get fired. And I think the president is right to raise that. It has absolutely zero to do with race.
You say it has zero to do with race. There is a clear pattern here, Mick. The fact is that before his inauguration, the president tweeted about John Lewis, a black congressman, that he should, and this is before his inauguration, he should spend time in his crime-infested district. Then, 2 weeks ago, he goes after these 4 members of the squad, all women of color, and says they should go back to the crime-infested countries from which they come. Then he talks about Elijah Cummings, and he says his district is rat and rodent infested. Infested. It sounds like vermin. It sounds subhuman. And these are all 6 members of Congress who are people of color.
I think you're spending way too much time reading between the lines.
I'm not reading between the lines. I'm reading the lines.
Does anyone watching this program dispute the fact that, or the possibility that if Adam Schiff had said the same thing about the border, that the president would be attacking Adam Schiff in the exact same way today? And
I don't think he'd be talking about his crime-infested, rodent-infested district.
He very well could. It has zero to do with the fact that Adam is Jewish, and everything to do with it, Adam would just be wrong if he were saying that. This is what the president does. He fights, and he's not wrong to do so.
And you're completely comfortable with him saying that this is a rodent-infested district and no human being would want to live there. You're comfortable with that personally?
Have you seen some of the pictures on the internet just this morning from the conditions in Baltimore, Maryland? Have you seen them?
You could do that in any inner city in America.
You absolutely could.
And you could argue, why doesn't the president do something to stop it?
The richest state in the nation, has abject poverty like that. A state, by the way, dominated for generations by Democrats. I think it's fair to have that conversation.
Okay. After Robert Mueller's testimony this week, President Trump declared victory. Here he is.
This was a very big day for our country. This was a very big day for the Republican Party. And you could say it was a great day for me.
But House Judiciary Committee Chair Jerry Nadler, even after the Mueller hearing, says he's going to go to court to try to get access to documents, try to get access to witnesses like former White House counsel Don McGahn. Here he is.
There appears to be compelling evidence of the president's misconduct outside of the four corners of the redacted version of the Mueller report, and we will work to uncover that evidence as well.
This isn't over.
Oh, no, it's far from over. In fact, I don't know if it was in that clip that you just saw a little later in that same press conference or after he got back to his district in New York. But Nadler actually told people he has begun an impeachment inquiry. Keep in mind, let's not lose sight of the fact that Jerry Nadler is facing a primary from his left in New York. He is falling over himself to become more and more progressive in order to try and keep his job and not lose to the next AOC. No, this is not over in their minds, which is just bizarre given what happened this week. Mueller answered the single one outstanding question. He said, they asked him, would you have indicted the president if he were not the president? And Mueller said, absolutely not. He would not do that. He answered incorrectly.
No, that's not what he said.
He did.
No, that isn't what he said. He said we didn't, because of the OLC, the Office of Legal Counsel Guidelines, he said we didn't even make a decision on that.
He got asked the question by Congressman Lieu, who I know, said, would you have indicted him if he were not the president? And he said, yes, we would have. And he went back to the beginning of the second hearing in the afternoon.
And that's when he said we didn't. He said yes, he did. I agree. But what he said was that I wouldn't have made it. We didn't even make that decision because the guidelines prevented us from doing that.
I actually just think you're wrong on that. If they could,
the record will show what it shows. I promise you're wrong.
If they had the evidence to indict the president, they would have done it, and they don't because there was no obstruction. You can go through the details about what Mr. Mueller said.
Let's look at that because despite the president's claim of total vindication, the special counsel and his testimony was not a moment in history, but he made it clear he's not saying the president did nothing wrong. Take a look.
The report did not conclude that he did not commit obstruction of justice. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Did you actually totally exonerate the president?
No.
Your investigation is not a witch hunt, is it?
It is not a witch hunt.
When the president said the Russian interference was a hoax, that was false, wasn't it?
True.
Not a witch hunt, not a hoax, and the president is not exonerated.
And that last one, which was the second clip you just played, is probably one of the most offensive things I've seen on television from a federal government employee since I've been here. And there's a fairly high bar for that. Did not exonerate the president. There is no way to exonerate the president. That's not the job of a special prosecutor. You don't get exonerated. You are innocent until proven guilty. In fact, I think it was Congressman Turner from Ohio raised that issue in another clip.
So did Ratcliffe.
Exactly.
I agree. But he's specifically saying, because the president says he was exonerated, I'm just simply...
You are innocent. And you know it. I know it. You're innocent until proven guilty. They could not find enough evidence to convict him, or excuse me, to charge him with any crime. This is over. Most folks know that it's over. In fact, if you go back and watch the response of most Democrats during the day, they knew it was a disaster. They knew it was over. But you still have Mr. Nadler and a small part of this Democrat party, the left wing of the party, bringing the entire party to the left to continue impeachment proceedings. Just a bizarre result.
Okay, let's move on. The Senate votes this week on a bill that would extend spending limits and to also extend the debt limit into 2021. This is what the bill would do. It raises spending by $324 billion over spending caps and runs out the clock on sequestration. No more forced spending cuts. Question: does the president want the Senate to pass it? And if it does, will he sign this bill?
Yes and yes. Keep in mind, the bill spends more money than the president wanted to spend. There's no question about that. But as I've said on this show, and you and I have talked about before, elections have consequences. And when the Democrats won the House, everybody knew we were going to end up spending more money. So what did we get in exchange? We got more money for defense, which we think that we need. We got more money for the VA, which we think that we needed. And this hasn't gotten nearly the attention, we got protection for the Republican policies that were in the previous year's bills. Keep in mind, there's policy riders that go in appropriations bills where lawmakers who spend money try and use that money to change policy outcomes. And the Democrats wanted to limit our policies on the border. They wanted to limit our policies regarding pro-life. They wanted to limit our policies regarding deregulation, and we won on every single one of those. So did we spend more money than we wanted to? Yes. Did we get a lot in return? Yes.
But candidate Trump, back in 2016, promised that he was going to balance the budget, and you, when you were a member of Congress, were a big deficit hawk. Take a look.
We can balance the budget very quickly.
But do you think in 5 years?
I think over a 5-year period, and I don't know, maybe I could even surprise you.
We are not paying for the government that we are getting. And unless we're going to continue to steal money from our kids, we have to make a very difficult choice, which is, are we going to raise taxes or are we going to reduce spending?
But look at these numbers.
Look at the hair in that.
I actually wasn't going to comment on that fact, but yes, the age hasn't helped either of us. Look at these numbers. After dealing with the Great Recession in his first term, the deficit under Obama dropped by an average of 11% a year in his second term. The deficit has increased by 15% a year in President Trump's first 2 years. Under President Trump, our national debt has increased by more than $2 trillion. And if this bill goes through, estimates are the Trump debt will top $4 trillion. How can Mick Mulvaney, budget hawk, support this?
Yeah, take our budget. Adopt our budget. The media and the press and the
yeah, but that's always dead on arrival. This is the bill.
Dead on arrival is the word that everybody always uses. But if you actually went to look at it and saw what Donald Trump would do if he could pass spending bills, which he can't, you would be on your path to balance, and the deficit would be down. Congress spends money.
You had wait a minute. You had Republican control of Congress for the first 2 years.
Yes, who also threw our budgets in the trash as well as dead on arrival. You asked me about Donald Trump. If Donald Trump were in charge, if Donald Trump,
he's the president.
But you also know your Constitution, which is that Congress spends the money. We have to deal with the Democrats in the House. We have to deal with Democrats in the Senate because of the 60-vote rules. We're always going to spend more money when Democrats have that seat at the table.
Okay, 30 seconds. Your reaction to the Supreme Court saying you can spend that $2.5 billion in Pentagon money for the wall?
It's the right decision. We build about 100 miles of wall. We'll be at 4 miles a week by the fall, probably higher than that into next year, and we are still on schedule now to have 450 miles of wall built by the end of 2020.
Mick, thank you. Thanks for coming in. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thanks for having me.